Joe Khalil is at the White House. President Biden returned from his weekend trip early, met with his national security team, and we understand has said that he will not speak this evening. Joe, what do you make of the change in tenor, right, from the White House that has been very critical of Israel over Gaza to now flipping and being lockstep with Israel over Iran?
Yeah, I mean, whether they're critical of Israel or not, I think it's very clear that they have a obvious stance against Iran and against these attacks. And I think that's what you're seeing across the board, Democrats, Republicans, and certainly from this White House. And you're right, President Biden did have to come back early today, returning around 5 o'clock. We're told that he went right into the Oval Office, eventually into the Situation Room, meeting with his top advisors, meeting with his top national security folks. And we're told that there were essentially two big concerns and conversations happening. One was the most immediate one, Leland, and that was how do you knock down these Iranian drones and missiles coming in? They were working under the same intelligence that we've been reporting, and we're hearing that there were hundreds of drones, and we're talking about missiles, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles as well. That is a joint effort. So that conversation was an American-Israeli joint effort. We can confirm that American air defense has been knocking down Iranian drones coming in as well. The second piece of that conversation, Leland, that's been happening in the White House is what comes next? What kind of response is going to be from the United States and from Israel? We're told it will be a joint response. That doesn't necessarily mean that there are going to be American troops or weapons that are used, but we certainly know that that is a possibility. We know the USS Carney is in place now. There are other American assets that are in the region right now as well. It could also, we're told, just simply be intelligence sharing. It could also just be suggestion and guidance coming from the American side as well in the coming days or weeks. We expect President Biden will potentially speak tomorrow and address the country there. So we may learn a lot more in terms of what is the next step. One more thing, Leland, that we've been hearing from our sources is that so far, and this could change, but so far what we've been told is that the Iranian attack has been targeting government sites, but not necessarily civilian or religious sites. So national defense here at the White House taking that into consideration as well. Take that, you know, as it is. That is what we're hearing, at least in terms of what is going on right now from the White House.
Do we have any idea, Joe, on what has been told to the U.S., on what the orders to the U.S. military are? And maybe they're intentionally ambiguous right now. But you've got tens of thousands of American troops in harm's way. You've got Iranian proxies that have a long history over the past 6 months of hitting U.S. troops. Do we know what the standing rules of engagement are? How far American troops have been authorized to protect Israel or themselves?
We don't know, and we haven't heard in clarity yet from the White House or from national security officials what those orders, those standing orders may be. All that we're hearing is a bit more of a generic response, which is that the United States militarily is going to defend its ally in Israel in any way that it sees fit. We don't know exactly what that means or whether rules of engagement have changed over the last few days or so. We know that obviously when you've got Houthi rebels that over the last couple of months, as you mentioned, Iranian proxies coming after American assets, then that is an almost automatic response. But in terms of what's happening now, all we're being told is that this is an Israeli-American joint response. The details of that we have not yet learned.
Yeah, and obviously you're talking about the Houthis that were shooting at the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea and shooting at U.S. Warships there. The Strait of Hormuz that is on the Iranian coast is a whole different ballgame if they shut down that in terms of what that does to oil prices and also just the distance of where they could go after U.S. warships is a completely different situation. Joe will obviously be on standby for us throughout the evening at the White House.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.